Mavis Okoye stood on her worn wooden porch, her house slippers soggy from the damp Georgia dirt. It was one of those Thursday afternoons where the sky couldn't decide whether to shine or hide. A cloth grocery tote hung from her arm, holding a warm rotisserie hen wrapped in foil, 2 tins of butter beans, and a half loaf of sweet potato bread. She pressed her hip against the front door, and something felt off. The key didn't slide. She jiggled it left, right, flipped it upside down like maybe her hands had forgotten how to work, but it wasn't her. It was the lock. The deadbolt had been changed. She paused, heart knocking, and then her fist did the same soft once, then twice, then firm. Still in her sky-blue sweater that held the scent of lavender water, still carrying her dinner like nothing had happened, still standing in the place she'd called home for 22 years. And then the door cracked open. Sahara, her son's girlfriend, peeked through, eyebrows lifting like she was surprised to see her. "Oh hey," Zahara said lightly. "You weren't supposed to be back this early." Mavis blinked. "Why can't I open my door?" Sahara shifted, glanced over her shoulder, then stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind her. I think Caleb was gonna explain about everything." "Explain what, baby?" Mavis asked, her voice thinning. Sahara gave one of those fake polite smiles folks use when they don't want to be part of what's coming. "You don't live here anymore." The words slammed like a gate. Mavis clutched her bag tighter, fingers numb. "What did you just say?" "It's just paperwork stuff. Nothing personal," Zahara said too fast. "Caleb said you signed everything already. Remember all those papers on the kitchen table a few weeks ago?" Mavis stared at her, the memory flickering, the documents. The way Caleb had brushed off her questions. "Just insurance," he'd said. "Just in case anything happens to you. You'll be protected, Mama." She had trusted him. Her son. And now her hands were trembling. Sahara avoided her eyes and ducked back inside, mumbling something about calling Caleb. The door shut, then locked. Again. Mavis stood there. 1 minute. 5, 10. No one came back. She didn't knock. She walked down the porch steps slowly, the chicken cradled under her arm like a baby. She didn't know where she was going. But she knew she couldn't go back. What Caleb had taken wasn't just a deed to her house, it was something sacred. Something rooted. But Mavis Okoye wasn't always a woman on a porch. Long before Zahara, long before legal tricks and betrayal, she had been something more. She had been a mother. Not just to any child, but to a boy no one else wanted. Back in 1996, Mavis was a night nurse at Unity Grace Medical Center in Hollow Creek, Georgia. Dependable. Quiet. She kept her grief tucked in the corners of her smile. 2 miscarriages and 1 failed round of IVF had left scars nobody could see, but she carried them every shift. She had long since made peace with being childless, or so she thought. Then came Caleb. He was barely 2, pale, bruised, bones showing through his skin. Wore a t-shirt that swallowed him whole, stained with ketchup and old tears. He'd fallen downstairs, they said. His foster mother didn't even stay at the I just signed some papers and left. Mavis hadn't gone looking to be anybody's mama, but sometimes the Lord doesn't knock. Sometimes he drops a child into your lap and says, "Let's see what you do with this." Caleb didn't speak for days. He clung to her scrub top like ivy, wouldn't eat unless she fed him herself, wouldn't sleep unless she was near. There was something in the way he latched onto her presence, something that said home, and that was enough. 2 months later, she filed the first set of guardianship papers. 6 months after that, he had her last name. Friends called her reckless. A single black woman in her late 30s adopting a white boy with behavior issues. "Sis, you trying to rescue the whole system?" "No," she would say, "just this one." Mavis gave Caleb everything she'd never had. A room with a race car bed and glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling. Packed lunches with fruit cut into hearts, piano lessons, swimming lessons, Saturday drives to the petting farm. When he developed asthma, she found the best black pediatrician in 3 counties. When he struggled with reading, she hired Miss Geraldine from the church. She even taught him to braid on his toy soldiers, so you'll know how to do your daughter's hair one day. She made him write thank you notes after birthdays. She never missed a single parent-teacher meeting. But parenting wasn't a fairy tale. As Caleb got older, questions came. By middle school, he'd ask, "Why do I look different from you? Why do people stare at us? Why do they say I'm adopted?" She always answered with the same truth. "Because you are. But that don't mean you're not mine." Still, he never fully accepted it. In high school, he pulled away. In college, visits became rare and overnight here. A text there. A quick "Hey Ma" before dashing off. But Mavis kept the porch light on, kept his room untouched, kept believing that love, quiet love, was still love. Then her husband passed, and Caleb started showing up more. At first, it felt like grace. He trimmed hedges, changed light bulbs, brought Zahara around on Sunday afternoons. They'd sit on the porch while Mavis baked skillet cornbread and watched Jeopardy from the kitchen. It felt like maybe, just maybe, her baby was coming back home. She had mistaken his return for healing. But Mavis Okoye didn't yet realize Caleb hadn't come home to build anything. He came back to measure what he could take. And by the time the truth peeled itself bare, her name was gone from the deed, her foundation stripped and sold for convenience. But a mother remembers. And Mavis had a memory sharpened by sacrifice. That night, she didn't knock again. She parked her car 2 streets over from what used to be her house, under a flickering street lamp near a row of leaning duplexes, chipped paint on the shutters and old milk crates for porch seats. She didn't cry, not once. But her hands stayed tight on the steering wheel, stuck at 10 and 2, long after she'd shut off the engine. The rotisserie hen rested cold in the seat beside her, grease turning the bag translucent. Her eyes stared through the windshield, not seeing anything, just sitting inside the weight. Grief's not always about losing a life. Sometimes it's about realizing someone you built your heart around was never who you thought they were. When her husband Leonard passed 3 years back, blood clot no one caught in time, Mavis thought pain had shown its sharpest side. Leonard had been her steady, a church-going man with few words and all heart. They met over hymns and catfish, loved slow, and held hands through 3 decades of quiet storms. But this Caleb's betrayal had a different sting. It bled deeper. The next morning, Mavis limped into the bank, more out of habit than need. She wasn't expecting surprises, and she didn't get one knot on her balance. It hadn't changed. Caleb had never touched it, never even knew it existed. After Leonard's death, the hospital had danced around responsibility. Complications, they'd called it. But Mavis had seen too much as a nurse to believe that. She filed, pressed, called in an old attorney friend from Macon, and 2 years later, she won. $9.5 million. Quietly, no headlines, no phone calls. She never told a soul. Not even Caleb. She tucked it across 5 different banks, under her maiden name, like folding love letters into the corners of a drawer. It wasn't fear that kept her quiet. It was wisdom. Because she knew money doesn't just change lives. It reveals people. That morning in the bank's waiting room, ankles swollen and eyes bloodshot, Mavis realized something bigger. Caleb didn't just take her house. He'd gambled on her being weak. He bet she wouldn't know how to fight. But Mavis had one thing he never learned: to use patience. So she paid cash for a motel room on the edge of Meridian, just 2 nights. Number ID required. She needed space. Not to rest, but to remember. In her purse was an old spiral notebook, bent at the edges, filled with verses, phone numbers, grocery lists, and underlined affirmations. At the very back, faded ink, dated the week her court case settled, was a scribbled note. Let money make you quiet, not loud. Let it buy you time, not titles. She read it twice, then smiled. Caleb thought he'd kicked her out, but all he'd done was set her free. Still, freedom didn't come with comfort. Not yet. There were fires Mavis would still have to walk through before she could rise from them. The first time Caleb slid those papers across the table, it was a Sunday. Mavis was folding dish towels. In her kitchen, the sweet smell of brown sugar and cinnamon dancing from the oven. A storm was coming. She could feel it in her knees, but she smiled anyway when he walked in unannounced. She didn't like surprises, but told herself maybe this was love showing up again. Caleb wore a fitted shirt too tight in the chest, like it belonged to a body still learning how to breathe. Sahara was with him, face down in her phone. "Hey, Mama," Caleb said with a half hug. "Brought some forms, nothing big, just stuff for taxes. You know, cleanup work, legal back-end stuff." Mavis paused, her towel hanging limp between her fingers. "What kind of forms?" Caleb pulled out a folder like he was performing a trick. "Some real estate transfer paperwork, a trust document, a bit of power of attorney language. Zahara's firm deals with this everyday super standard." Sahara chimed in without looking up, her voice flat and practiced. "It's just two. Protect your assets, Miss Okoye. Avoid probate. Nothing changes for you." Mavis frowned. "I didn't ask to avoid anything." Caleb chuckled, waving her off. "Exactly, Ma. That's why we're handling it for you. Just in case God forbid anything happened, this keeps everything smooth. No court mess. Stays in the family." She squinted at the pages, letters blurring without her glasses. She rarely wore them, hated how they pinched her temples. Caleb noticed and slid a pen toward her. "Here, I already highlighted the spots. You don't need to worry about the rest. I've read it all." "We're good," Mavis hesitated. Something in her gut told her to ask more, to push back. She wanted to say, "Why do you need this now?" Or, "Let me get someone else to read it." But Caleb had that soft urgency in his tone, the one children use when they want their way without argument. And she'd always wanted to believe him, but Caleb wasn't just some grown man in a fitted shirt. He was her baby. The same child who used to wail every time she stepped away from his crib, who wheezed whenever joy got too big for his tiny lungs, who once clung to her wrist the entire night through a rash of chickenpox and refused to sleep without her fingers. In his, that's the Caleb she saw when he placed those pages in front of her, and that's the Caleb she trusted. So she signed, page after page, pen gliding like a hymn between their hands. He'd even joked, "You're making history, Mama." She gave him a dry chuckle, nothing more than a sigh in her throat. The oven timer went off, the smell of cinnamon and brown sugar curling through the air as she got up to check the pie. That moment would replay in her head for weeks after the sting of the ink, the click of the pen cap, Zahara's smug smile that lingered just a second too long. She didn't know it then, but that day would be the last time she ever sat at that kitchen table as its rightful owner. The visits changed after that, got shorter. Caleb began popping in with thick envelopes, introducing men with tight smiles, and words like capital gains and investment leverage. She didn't care for their plans, didn't need to be told her house was equity waiting to be unlocked. He began calling her Mavis in front of Zahara. That was new. One afternoon while she was watering the begonias, she overheard Zahara say, "Once this place sells, we'll finally make that move to Atlanta." That's when Mavis began packing a go bag in secret, just in case. She tucked away her Bible, her passport, the last photo she had of Leonard, and her old notebook with account numbers that Caleb had never even dreamed existed. Her body might have slowed over the years, but her mind was still sharp. Sharp enough to know when love had turned sour. But she hadn't come this far to let everything be swept away, not without reminding Caleb exactly whose name he signed away. The day he called her a guest in her own home, Mavis said nothing. It was a Wednesday, sometime after lunch. She'd just finished vacuuming the living room, a task she still insisted on doing herself. Her niece teased her about it, but Mavis believed that dust didn't care about your age, and neither should a clean home. Caleb walked in, sunglasses still perched on his face, earbuds slung around his neck like jewelry. Sahara followed behind, yammering to someone over Bluetooth. They didn't speak to her, just strolled right past like she was staff. Then Caleb turned back and tossed out, "Next time you use the vacuum, make sure to empty it. We've got folks coming to look at the place this weekend." Mavis blinked. "People? Realtors," he shrugged. "Just testing the waters. Market research." She stared at him, quiet but steady. "You're selling the house?" He chuckled like she'd asked him if pigs could fly. "Not yet. Just exploring options, Mama. Gotta stay ahead." She stood straighter. "Our options?" That's when he said it, cool as clay. "You're a guest now, Mama. It's still your space, of course. But legally, well, you know how it is." Her fingers curled around the vacuum handle. She didn't cry, didn't argue. Just nodded once. That night, she packed the small bag for real. Took only what she needed: her Bible, her notebook. 2 dresses, 1 pair of sneakers, and her wedding band tucked inside a velvet pouch by the bed, untouched since Leonard passed but never discarded. Caleb didn't ask where she was going. Zahara didn't care. As far as they were concerned, they'd already won. But Mavis wasn't finished. She checked into a budget motel near the freeway, beside a gas station with a sign that blinked, "Open." 1 letter short. The bed creaked when she sat down. The heater wheezed like a tired dog, but it was quiet. And it was hers. At the chip desk, she opened her notebook. There was a number in it from years ago, belonged to a woman named Doris, who used to work for a non-profit that helped elderly folks navigate housing scams. Doris once helped Mavis when a tenant tried to sue over leaky pipes. She dialed. 1 ring. 2. Disconnected. Mavis sighed. Then remembered Clarence C.J. Bell Leonard's old friend from Hollow Creek, a retired lawyer with a cane and a temper, but a mind sharper than a switchblade. She hadn't spoken to him in years, but she dialed anyway. It rang 6 times. Then, "This better be Jesus or trouble," Mavis grinned. "Might be both. Evie, it's me. I need to talk." CJ didn't hesitate. Real friends don't when they still remember who brought you stew after your gallbladder surgery. He'd been waiting for this call. The next morning they met at Marla's Kitchen off Highway 20, a greasy spoon still slinging hash browns and calling everyone sugar, no matter the decade. He looked older silver in his beard, slower in his step, but his stare was the same, heavy, true. "You look like a tossed-out quilt," he said, settling into the booth. Mavis chuckled. "Morning to you too." He sipped his coffee black. No cream like Leonard used to, and folded his hands. "All right," he said. "Spill it. Don't edit. Don't polish. Just talk." So she did. She told him everything. The forms, the new locks, the names on the paperwork, the way her own son called her a guest in the home she built with her own 2 hands. CJ didn't interrupt once. Uncle B.O. leaned back in that booth at Sweet Grace Diner, steam curling up from his chipped mug, and let out a whistle so low it sounded like wind sliding through pine trees. "That boy swindled you like a con man on a corner," he muttered, shaking his head. But he forgot the most dangerous thing he ever learned. He forgot who raised him. Mavis stared down at her napkin, rubbing the fabric between her fingers. "But I signed the deed, B.O. It's my name off that paper, not his." He nodded slowly, tapping the table with a thick knuckle. "True, but if he tricked you into signing, if he didn't explain it proper, or lied straight out, then that's fraud, and fraud ain't legal, just dirty." Her eyes narrowed. "You think we can take him to court?" Uncle B.O. gave her a look that said more than words. "Child, I could take him to court with one eye closed and both hands tied. She let out a soft chuckle, but it didn't rise. Far. I'm tired, Bio. I don't want revenge. I just want my house. I want to sleep without feeling like I got played like a drum in front of strangers. He nodded again. Then we ain't gonna destroy him, we gonna educate him. For the next 2 hours, they sat in that booth, swapping memories for timelines, feelings for facts. Mavis had her little brown notebook open, flipping through the dates and scribbles she'd kept without even knowing why. Nurse habit, document everything. Uncle B.O. explained next steps like he was giving a sermon. Petitions, legal review, pushing to get the transfer revoked. Then, as the sun shifted past the blinds, Mavis said something she hadn't told a soul, not even Lemuel when he was alive. B.O., I got money, he blinked. You mean savings? I mean settlement, $9.5 million. From that case with the hospital, after Lemuel passed. B.O. nearly dropped his spoon. You been sitting on $9 million this whole time while that boy was out here playing Monopoly with your life? Mavis shrugged, voice soft. Didn't want it to change nothing. I didn't want Ryan Caleb to think I owed him more just 'cause I had it. B.O. stared at her for a long time, then reached out and squeezed her hand. That love you got? It's rare, but don't mistake it for weakness. Mavis looked out the diner window, her reflection older than she felt, cheeks worn thin, eyes too tired to shine. But there was steel under that skin. I want to do this the right way, B.O. No TV, no cameras. No drama. Just get my name back on my damn door. He nodded, and she believed him. But before the court dates, before lawyers in press suits and judges with stern eyes, Mavis knew. There was one more thing she had to do. One last conversation, not with the man Caleb had become, but the little boy she once rocked to sleep while jazz crackled from the radio and cough syrup stained his pillow. She didn't call first. She just pulled up in that same driveway, now trimmed and cold like a stranger's front step. The begonias she'd planted were gone, dug up like they never mattered. She knocked once. Caleb answered, holding a blender bottle, wearing gym shorts and a hoodie that said "Build Your Empire." His face froze. Mama Mavis, what are you doing here? She stepped close enough to smell the fake vanilla from his protein shake. Just need a moment, she said. He glanced behind him, then sighed and stepped out onto the porch. If this is about the house, let me finish, she said. He shut up. I raised you when nobody else would, not for credit. Not for show, because you needed love and I had plenty. I gave up rest, time, pride, my whole body and soul, to build a world you'd never have to beg from. His eyes darted, jaw clenched. You paid me back with lies and a locksmith. She stared hard. Don't call me mama if it's just for convenience. Silence stretched. I ain't here to fight. Just to let you know, I'm not broke, never was. I could buy this house 10 times without blinking. But I never told you, 'cause love ain't business, and loyalty don't come with a receipt. Caleb paled. I didn't know that. You weren't supposed to. She squared her shoulders. But now I know what you're made of, and so do you. He shifted, about to speak, but she cut him off. I've already spoken to a lawyer. This goes forward, whether you like it or not. I just wanted to look in your face before it does. His shoulders dropped. You gonna sue me? No, she said, walking down the steps. I'm gonna educate you. And with that, Mavis Okoye, daughter of a seamstress and widow of a good man, walked back to her car with her head high and heart clear. No begging, no tears. Just a woman finally remembering her value. And Caleb, for the first time in his life, didn't have a single word to say. 3 months later, the house stood quiet. No porch lights. No music through the windows. No sign of Natalie's voice cutting through the yard with fake sweetness. The blinds were drawn like eyelids, trying not to see what had happened. The for sale sign was gone, replaced by a cheerful wreath on the door. The new owner, a retired music teacher from Gulfport named Miss Geraldine, said the place felt heavy when she first stepped inside, like something sacred had been bruised. And it had. Uncle Bio moved fast. The fraud petition rolled through Chancery Court quicker than sweet tea on a summer day. The judge barely needed a minute after seeing the documents, the dates, Mavis' careful records written in her nurse's hand. It was clear. The deed transfer had been sneaky, manipulative, and legally weak. Caleb never even showed up to the hearing. He'd skipped town 2 weeks before, left the state entirely. Natalie went back to Dallas alone. When Mavis heard, she didn't smile, didn't smirk. She just breathed. That kind of slow, long exhale. You don't even know you've been holding. But she didn't move back in. The walls had too many memories. The oven still smelled like betrayal. The stairs remembered her tired feet. Instead, she did what nobody expected. She took the money, her full untouched inheritance, and walked into a future with both feet planted. She bought 3 modest homes on the south side of Pascagoula, nothing flashy. Just enough. Painted them fresh colors, sunflower yellow, clay red, deep ocean blue. Then she opened them as safe spaces for women over 60 who'd been kicked out, overlooked, discarded by family or landlords. Called it Len's Place after her late husband, the man who taught her that peace is earned, not found. The first resident was Miss Ruthie, age 75, tossed out by her granddaughter when she couldn't babysit anymore. The second was Clarice, whose daughter sold her house while she was still recovering from knee surgery. Mavis cooked for them on Sundays, played dominoes on the porch, kept the TV low and the front doors open. She never had to explain her story. The women saw it in her posture, in the calm way she poured coffee, in the silence she let sit between their stories. Uncle B.O. still came by, especially when paperwork stacked up. He joked about putting her on a billboard, the woman who turned betrayal into a business plan. Mavis just rolled her eyes and smiled. I did what I was taught. You don't scream when they push you. You pray. You plant. You protect your peace. She understood now. This wasn't just about a house. It was about refusing to be defined by a moment someone tried to shrink you. 1 year later, Mavis sat on the porch of Len's Place with a fleece blanket wrapped around her shoulders. The Mississippi sky hung wide and golden, the kind of sunset that made you believe in hymns again. Ruthie was upstairs knitting. Clarice was in the kitchen humming while she sorted collard greens. A letter came that morning, no return address. Just her name, handwritten in shaky letters she hadn't seen in almost a year. Inside was a note. I messed up. I see it now. I don't know why I did it that way. Maybe I thought I deserved more. Maybe I just didn't understand what you gave me. You didn't deserve it. I hope you're okay, Caleb. She read it twice, then folded it, slid it into the back of her Bible right between Psalm 27 and her husband's funeral program. Not because she wanted to forget, but because some things deserve to be remembered without being repeated. She didn't write him back. She didn't need to. Forgiveness for Mavis wasn't about letting him off the hook. It was about cutting herself free from what he'd done. She knew now, you can raise someone right, give them everything, love them until your bones ache, and still lose them. Not because you failed, but because they chose to fail you. And that's not your shame to carry. Mavis leaned back, sipped her tea. The crickets started their evening chorus, soft and steady like a memory. She closed her eyes and let the peace settle in her bones. Home wasn't the house they stole, it was what you rebuild, quiet and powerful, from the ground back up. And so, Mavis didn't just survive, she rebuilt. Not with rage, not with revenge, but with the kind of quiet strength they don't put in movies, the kind only real mothers carry, the kind that holds back tears, signs papers in silence, then rises to create something the world didn't see coming. Because real love, it doesn't scream, it doesn't steal, And it sure doesn't put your name on a deed just to erase it later. Mavis proved what so many of us forget. You don't have to fight dirty to win clean. You don't have to shout to be heard by heaven. And when they try to take everything from you, you build something they'll never be part of. So if you've ever been overlooked, if someone ever tried to replace you, erase you, or tell you your love didn't count, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell us if you've ever been underestimated by someone you raised, helped, or trusted, and what you did next. Hit that like button, share this with someone who needs to remember their power, and subscribe for more stories that celebrate resilience, justice, and the quiet strength of real Black women. Because we don't just survive, we rise. And baby, we do it beautifully.